did what I had to do to protect our world. Things just got out of hand.
You break the rules and become a hero. It doesn't seem fair.
We should tell him the truth.
Welcome back, everyone. This is going to be my Doctor Strange 2 video for how Marvel is bringing X-Men in the MCU. There have been 4 different trailers they've released for this movie so far, and they all have slightly different footage with different Easter eggs and references for X-Men and mutants, so we'll break it all down. Welcome to the MCU, Professor X, and all the X-Men you're bringing with you. We also have to thank Scarlet Witch in Doctor Strange for messing with the multiverse so much. Thank you for wrecking the multiverse so bad that now we're getting X-Men. Speaking of wrecking the multiverse so bad that other characters from other franchises come to the MCU, we're doing a giveaway for that Spider-Man No Way Home Blu-ray. There's so many extra Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, Matt Murdock Daredevil scenes. Cannot wait to check that out. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and let me know which X-Men characters besides Patrick Stewart's Professor X you want to see come back to the MCU from the Fox Marvel movies. Patrick Stewart is really just the tip of that X-Men spear. And just to be clear, when I'm talking about how X-Men come into the MCU properly in this video, I'm talking about the core X-Men characters, but also kind of mutants just in general. We've actually had mutants in the MCU before the events of Doctor Strange 2, which I'll explain. Some of you already probably know what I'm talking about there. Patrick Stewart's Professor X is just the first legit core X-Men character that's appeared on screen in a Marvel MCU movie from the Fox Marvel movies. I'll explain where Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and Billy and Tommy fall on the spectrum of mutants and X-Men characters canonically in the MCU. MCU Scarlet Witch is canonically viewed as a mutant in the MCU, not an X-Men character. She was created in the classic X-Men comics in the 1960s, but she wasn't really on the X-Men team for any extended period of time, and she was only featured in a couple of X-Men the Animated Series episodes, later animated series featuring the X-Men. So just in general, in pop culture, she's not really viewed as a core X-Men team member, even though she appears in some of the seminal X-Men stories like House of M, and I will talk about that too, because I do think that Scarlet Witch will be a big part of how they bring X-Men to the MCU.
No more mutants.
During WandaVision, some of you probably picked up on the fact that they finally officially canonized Scarlet Witch as a mutant on the DL. It was really subtle. They didn't say the word mutant out loud, but they did clarify that she was born with her powers. Quicksilver too. She always had her chaos magic abilities. The Mind Stone just deepened her access to her powers more fully. It didn't mutate her biology any more than it already was. In order to be considered a mutant, you have to be born with your powers. That's why Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, Billy, and Tommy are all mutants in the MCU, but Spider-Man and the Hulk, for instance, who have biologically based powers, are not mutants. They're called mutates. The Fantastic Four, comic book Deadpool, not the Ryan Reynolds version of Deadpool, in Monica Rambeau now, after the events of WandaVision, are mutates. I say comic book Deadpool, not Ryan Reynolds Deadpool, because in the first Deadpool movie, they actually talk about him being born with the X gene. So when Ryan Reynolds Deadpool comes to the MCU via the multiverse, he will be a mutant.
Any tips on getting into the MCU there, Korg?
Mutates are people who got their powers later in life after their biology was mutated by some accident or process, like the radioactive spider bite. Biting Peter Parker mutated his biology, giving him his powers. The difference between X-Men and mutants is that X-Men have to be born with the X gene specifically, or they have to have been part of the core X-Men team or roster for a long time. So you could be a mutant but not an X-Men, but all X-Men are mutants. I've talked a little bit about the X-Men movie that Kevin Feige and the Marvel people are developing inside the MCU. It's going to be a couple years before it comes out, but the working title for that is now just called The Mutants. That doesn't mean that they're not ever going to use the X-Men name inside the MCU. The title, The Mutants, was what Stan Lee originally called the X-Men comic book before he finished developing it with Jack Kirby. So Kevin Feige is just honoring OG Stan Lee when calling the movie The Mutants while they're developing it. The title will probably change before they actually release it. During WandaVision, Billy and Tommy are born to Scarlet Witch with their powers as mutants, but that happened after Marvel got the rights back to the X-Men. It was the first example of brand new mutants coming to the MCU, Scarlet Witch being a special case. Like legally, they couldn't call her a mutant until now. WandaVision was just sort of the setup for like a full reveal that they'll do during Doctor Strange 2 when Professor X here on the Illuminati team lays down the full truth of all existence and mutants to Doctor Strange.
We should tell him the truth.
When Professor X says the Multiverse Illuminati team here should tell Doctor Strange the truth, he's mostly talking about the truth of why they're here in this place, why the team exists to protect reality in the multiverse, and the truth about why it's important that they stop Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange, for that matter, from further messing with the multiverse. And through the course of their interactions with Professor X, he'll learn what mutants are, about this huge group of humans who were born with powers in other universes, and about the X-Men team from the universe where this Professor X came from. There's been a lot of talk about which version of Professor X this is. Is this the original version, or is he a variant from some other universe? The way I believe the X-Men movie producers from the Fox Marvel movies explained the Wolverine-Logan movie is that it was meant to take place in the very far distant future of the main X-Men timeline, long after the events of Doctor Strange 2 would be taking place. So it's still technically possible for this version of Professor X to be that original Professor X from the Fox Marvel movies, but my early theory is that he'll wind up being a variant from a different universe where the events of the X-Men movies in that universe played out totally differently, leading him to depart that Earth and join this Multiverse Illuminati team. Because I don't think that the original Professor X would just completely bail on his team that way. What this all means, though, is that some of the core X-Men of the MCU going forward, Marvel Phase 4, Marvel Phase 5, not all of them, but some of them, will be legacy actors from the Fox Marvel movies, or variants of those characters played by the same actors. And in some cases, variants played by different actors. Wolverine is a good example of that. Everybody hoping that Hugh Jackman eventually comes back as a version of Wolverine in the MCU. There is a rumor that a version of Wolverine will appear in Doctor Strange 2 as part of all this craziness, but he won't be played by Hugh Jackman. It'll be some other Wolverine variant. We've already seen a couple variants of major Avengers characters in the trailer, so it's no surprise that they would also have variants of other actors playing some of those X-Men characters too. Some of the other X-Men characters will also be totally new actors inside the MCU who were either born with their powers in the MCU, but the X gene just hadn't been activated yet, or they never realized they had powers until present day, or like in the case of Billy and Tommy, they just hadn't been born until present day. The other obvious answer, too, is that there have probably been some X-Men characters, mutants, inside the MCU that have been keeping themselves hidden this whole time. Kind of like the Eternals explainer, like, how have they been here this whole time, but we're not learning about them till now? Well, they're kind of hiding themselves. And talking about the big House of M twist, early Scarlet Witch theory, we all thought early on during WandaVision they were going to have a reverse House of M moment with the Hex, and Scarlet Witch was going to bring more mutants to the MCU using the Hex. But now I think that they were saving a twist like that for Doctor Strange too, because they tend to save all the biggest WTF moments for the movies. So the early theory is that through the course of the movie, Scarlet Witch will mess the multiverse up badly enough, along with Doctor Strange and the other characters, that it will cause multiverse versions of X-Men and mutants, legacy actors, to start showing up in the MCU after Doctor Strange, whoever's left alive on this Multiverse Illuminati team, puts some magical flex tape on reality.
What's happening?
They're starting to come through, and I can't stop them.
It's very similar to the ending of Spider-Man No Way Home when all those multiverse versions of Sinister Six characters started showing up inside the cracks in reality coming to the MCU. Like, Doctor Strange fixed everything with the spell and theoretically sent all of them back to where they came from. But I think after Doctor Strange 2, when they patch everything at the end, reality will just be a little bit different. Like, you put it back together, but it's not exactly the same. And that's how they'll bring more X-Men characters into the MCU. We also have to talk about Tiamat in the Eternals movie. My theory about the way they ended that movie, what happened with Tiamat, is still the same. There's a comic book run from the past several years where Marvel said that the X gene was created when the blood of an ancient celestial leached into Earth's soil, just slowly mutating human DNA over thousands of years. They can still use Tiamat for a twist like that inside the MCU, so a massive amount of cosmic energy was released during that final boss fight to transform him. That massive amount of cosmic energy could create a bunch of new mutants, or just say that the event activated a bunch of people's X genes. What a coincidence that none of the Marvel Phase 4 movies have addressed what happened with Tiamat yet. So theoretically, Doctor Strange 2 and Thor Love and Thunder, which take place after that, would be like the next place where they could address what happened with Tiamat and how that's going to affect the MCU going forward. But all this means that when Marvel puts together the first legit X-Men team in the MCU, some of the people in the movie will be legacy actors from the multiverse who wanted to come back, or variants of some of those characters, and some will be totally new versions of the characters from inside the MCU. Congratulations, Cameron Downing, you're the giveaway winner from my last big Marvel video. Please email me on the About page of my channel so I can get your contact details. Everyone click here for my full review of the Batman movie, and click here for my Doctor Strange 2 Superior Iron Man video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.